Great. Yeah. Let me put it somewhere on this laptop. Link side John. There's a presenter who needs a link online. Musioka. Presenting on. Upon the presentation. Si akwe ama akutumie kwa nini presentation yake? No, yes. No, sasa nikamwambia kuleta maji na kuchia. Nikipitia na chukua bike. Sijui kama nilikuwa nitakwambia sasa inatoka nchini lakini ndio vile mimi Conoce el Chile. Some of them like there's another one whom I saw. But there's another who was here already. I think the problem for me to know the message. Sio kako online. What did you organize the program? Imagina Yeah, alikuja tuanze. Sasa nipigie simu kubali kiasi.
Dr. Hata prof bado hajajoin kama alikuwa ametoka.
But at least ni wapi is now.
Hello, bro. You are on mute. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, allow me to welcome the session chair, Dr. Beatrice. Then we can start from there. If it's in order with you, please.
Yeah, it is. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Karibu sana Meru University on virtual platform.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon session. We're going to have a session whose main theme is integrating the social sciences in pandemic preparedness and response. Now, our program reads that we will have a guest speaker, and that is Professor Mugendi Kanampiu, who's already with us online. And welcome so much, Professor. We are very honored to have you grace our conference. After which we are going to have Eunice Musioka. Eunice will also present online. Eunice is going to talk about figurative mistranslation in the Bible, a study of the Kikamba Bible translation. And then we'll have a presentation from Orucho Justin Amadi and Onkundi Elizabeth Kwamboka. The two will tell us about euthanasia, and they will be exploring the social worker perspective on ethical, legal, cultural, and religious considerations in end-of-life care. Then we have Kangandi Wanja Eunice, who is here with us present physically, and she'll talk to us about Gikuyu romance and cultural aesthetics. This is a description of the positive Gikuyu romance patterns in selected Gikuyu popular songs. So Wanja, welcome. And we will close the session with a presentation from Gervasi. In fact, we have two Gervasis and Peter. They'll talk about the rationale behind naming of persons, the stepwise M method among the Tigania sub-tribe of the Meru community. So those are the presentations we'll have today. We will be giving everybody at least 15 minutes to present their work, and we will also have questions after all of us have presented. But at this juncture, I'd like to welcome Professor Mugendi Kanampiu to take us through his presentation. Welcome, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. and good afternoon, everyone. It's a huge privilege for me to be part of this second international conference. and I would commend the organizers for excellent work. I'm going to switch off my video just to keep my signal stable, and then share my screen. Kindly confirm that you can see my presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay. So once again, as I mentioned, this is a really great opportunity to speak about integrating the social sciences in pandemic preparedness and response. And what I'll be doing is I'll just be speaking about a specific case we have here in Machakos University, which is the newly established UNESCO Chair of Cloud Computing for Sustainable Development, and hopefully connect that conversation to the discussion around the main theme, which is about United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and then we proceed from there. So just to start us off, presently, as we have seen, the World Economic Forum and a number of other organizations has been doing regular reports on the top 10 skills of the 21st century. And what is interesting is that as we move from 2015 to 2020, which is not very long ago, we notice that whereas the number one skill that was required in 2015 remains also in 2020 and going for the same one, which is complex problem solving. And this is something that we need to encourage within our own practice, but also within our teaching and pedagogical discourse, so that our learners are involved in complex problem solving, because the world now has become incredibly complex. In design, we refer to these as wicked problems, which means when you start to engage with a problem, you realize it's a lot more complex than you thought. So it requires that kind of thinking. We often speak about critical thinking, which is ally. And in 2015, critical thinking was at number 4, now it is at number 2. And I'm just jumping through because of the theme of today's presentation. And number 10 in 2015 was creativity. And now see where creativity has fallen in. It's number 3, it has pushed people management just below that. So what I'm emphasizing is that the modern way of thinking, and this is why maybe CBC, as much as we may have our own opinions about its merits, it does indeed encourage a lot more complex problem solving in a practical sense, as well as critical thinking and creativity. So those first 3 one can see and they're right across the board. But when it comes to social sciences, people management is critical. Coordinating with others, this is teamwork and collaboration. Number 6, emotional intelligence, often now referred to multiple intelligence theory. When I was growing up, if you didn't have a reasonably adequate IQ, intellectual quotient, you would suffer, the wrath of many of our teachers. They made, like quickly in the former standard 4. If you didn't do quick arithmetic in your head, you ended up getting dusters flying in your direction, or even chalk. Those were the days when chalk and chalk was the main mode of teaching. And then number 7, which is judgment and decision making, meaning you don't always have all the answers, but you need to work with what you have. This is where judgment comes in and prioritizing what needs to be done. And then number 8, service orientation. We've watched as when some of us were young, the scientists in a lab looking through a microscope or petri dishes was the iconic scholar that we wanted to become. Now it's young people working with apps in the digital space. So we've moved more into services now than actually product and manufacturing, and that's the future. And as we enter into AI, artificial intelligence, and robotics, in the 4th industrial revolution, that becomes even more critical. And then number 9, negotiation, and finally cognitive flexibility, because of the complexity and diversity we need to embrace. So the multiple intelligences theory, of course, talks about the different ways in which people learn and the different ways in which they express their intelligence. And we talked about, primarily we focused on the linguistic one, which is down here, as well as the logical mathematical, which is on the right side over here. And those two, in our time, were the two that were most emphasized or celebrated. Now we know there's musical, there's interpersonal, like people who are very good in sales and marketing are excellent at interpersonal intelligence and social intelligence thereby. Intrapersonal, this is where emotional intelligence comes in, how we deal with frustration, how we deal with the vicissitudes of life has become important. Naturalists tend to be natural scientists in the way they look at the world around them, and Spachi also work with the three-dimensional spaces. So those are the kind of spaces we are now looking at. Now, in terms of discourse and different disciplinary foci, we find that we've moved now from where we used to have silos, disciplines standing on their own, to multidisciplinarity, and in this case we are looking at the development of a field like nanotechnology. Our physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering at one time had very clear and distinct boundaries, and those silos were the ones that defined those kind of disciplines. So even when we interacted as teams, we still very much protected and stayed within our boundaries. And then when we moved into interdisciplinarity, we started to see at the boundaries where the overlaps between disciplines happen, new disciplines appear. So for example, between engineering and biology, we see bioengineering, between physics and engineering, mechanical engineering, and so on. So that was the beginnings of something happening within this subdisciplinary area. But now the trend is now towards what we call transdisciplinary kind of thinking. And entire new fields have emerged. So if you collapse those four disciplines, for example, that we've talked about, which are all in the STEM space, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, you realize that then they start to touch on a new discipline where you have now nanotechnology. To the point where nanotechnology now is so big that the early stages it was just in the intersection. Now it's actually a discipline in its own that now has brought all the other disciplines together, a kind of consilience of knowledge, if you may. And it transcends the traditional boundaries. In education, we call this mode 2 knowledge, and this is increasingly becoming the space. So even as much as I've shown you an example here of STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, I'm actually a proponent for STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. And for the purpose of this presentation, because the humanities and social sciences fall into the A of STEAM, because you cannot really be innovative if you don't bring in the humanities, and the intelligence we spoke about earlier actually support this approach. So I'll just mention in passing one of the ways in which the humanities really brings innovation to the different disciplines is through something we call design thinking, which is inspired by human-centered design. Most of them have 5 steps, usually up to test, and this particular that I'm showing, which is from design with impact, goes all the way to implementation. But the critical thing in design thinking and why it stems from human-centered design is the intention of understanding how end users deal with the things that we produce for them. The other word that we use is co-design or collaborative design or participatory design, because you design with, not designing for. And this is an important distinction when we talk about the humanities. The humanities naturally embrace people and their sensitivities and sensibilities, where the sciences tend to put emotional and psychological issues in a controlled environment. Human beings don't work like that. They don't follow clean, demarcated lines of thinking. Human beings, if I can use the term in parentheses, are messy. They don't follow linear logic. And that's why design thinking that really helps us to try to understand people in a much deeper context. So myself and a number of colleagues, when I was based in South Africa, we developed something called Human-Centered Design Toolkit for Africa. IDEO.com, many of you who work with design thinking and human-centered design or HCD toolkits will recognize that IDEO inspired a whole host of toolkits that are being deployed constantly across the world. So we sat together as friends, mainly from the design background, and we realized that the tools that came from elsewhere, whereas they had some universal applications, we skipped or did not embrace some of the sensitivities that made us truly African. Africans have unique values, unique communal and cultural practices that needed to be factored in. For example, in Africa, we use a lot of proverbs and also songs and dance as means of communication. We talked earlier on about the multiple intelligences. Africans are particularly good at using their body in a spatial kind of a three-dimensional way. And this is something we needed to embrace so that we can communicate with our communities in a language that they understood. So we developed this toolkit, and those are just screenshots from different pages. And at some point we realized that this toolkit, because it's in English, it served only a very small percentage of the population that we were seeking to engage with. Many of you will know that Kiswahili was recently adopted as one of the official languages of the African Union, because there is more than 300 million people in Africa that actually speak Kiswahili. And so that realization led us, in the spirit of being empathetic, to develop a human-centered toolkit in Kiswahili. And so these are just, again, screenshots. As you can see, some of them are quite wordy because Swahili is a lot more descriptive than English. But nonetheless, this is an attempt at using the humanities and social sciences as a basis to develop tools that are actually relevant to our context. And in this case, linguistics and languages helps us unpack different tools. And what I wanted to emphasize is that this is still being prototyped. Of course, we would have a version that has what you call popular Kiswahili, and then it's Kiswahili Sanifu, which for those like in Tanzania and in the coastal regions of Kenya, who speak a much more grammatically, classical form of language. But nonetheless, we need to be able to communicate with our people. That's the spirit of what this particular toolkit is about. So we're still testing it, and hopefully once we have fixed it and cleaned out all the glitches, we will be able to deploy it. So again, I just wanted to bring design thinking into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals space, because your main something for this conference, which I also really celebrate, is how sustainable development goals can actually impact and inform the way we think going forward. So we've looked at how design thinking can contribute to that. As you know, there are 17 such goals, from number 1, low poverty, to number 4, quality education, which many of us are in that space of equitable and inclusive education, to number 3, good health and well-being, which we've come to realize post-COVID has become a space even for mental health and well-being, not just physical health as we thought in the past, to issues like sustainable and renewable energy, number 7, to sustainable cities and communities, number 11, and of course climate change, the big one, number 13, which is impacting just about everyone, and number 17, which encourages us to go into international partnerships so as to realize all the UN SDGs. So I want to now focus on the case study that I mentioned in my title. Now, in response to this reality, Machakos University applied for and fortunately was granted a UNESCO chair. And our focus is on cloud computing for sustainable development. Now, in terms of context, the reason why we wanted to do this is we have a Luban workshop at Machakos, which is built in partnership with the Tianjin City Vocational College under the Road and Belt Initiative from China. And it offers us, through the other relationship with Huawei, kind of training in internet security, cloud computing, and allied areas of ICT. And based on the fact that we have that global workshop, which is actually the second one in Africa, I think the first one was in Djibouti, if I'm not wrong. So moving now from that point to using this workshop as a unique living lab, also the relationship we have with Kwanza Technopolis, which is not far from our university. And as you know, Kwanza is a smart city. It's taking ICT and the Internet of Things to a whole new level where it works at the level of a city, not just an institution like in our case. So that was the spirit. We wanted to build upon that so that we would have a center of excellence that would service not just East Africa, but actually we looked further beyond, because UNESCO is a global body. We also wanted this chair to act as a major catalyst for innovation in cloud computing applications. We also wanted to strengthen the quadruple helix. This is a model of partnership that incorporates actors from academia, business, civil society, and government. And we also wanted to offer novel applications of cloud computing across a number of fields, ultimately to improve the quality of life of communities living within our region and beyond. And as you can see, we also wanted to address the wicked problems associated with climate change, distance learning, food insecurity, as well as health-related concerns for people, livestock, and environment. So I'll get into the sub-themes of this chair before I now go to the last bit to wrap up. And the sub-themes are as follows. The first is on agriculture and food security. Remember that this is a transdisciplinary chair that is looking at how we can apply cloud computing to promote sustainable development. And of course, agriculture and food security speaks to UN SDG number 2. Number 2, we looked at health and well-being, which you saw as I was speaking earlier, as well as education and training, space surveillance, space science and surveillance, and finally, climate resilience and environmental sustainability. So these 5 sub-themes or focus areas are the ones that we are working on at Machakos University under the auspices of this unit co-chair on cloud computing for sustainable development. I'll get into a little more detail now for it. So number 1, if I can just elaborate a little more, remember we spoke about zero hunger. That talks to agriculture and food security. And we'll be looking at how big data applications can improve agriculture, particularly in this arid and semi-arid area, which is where Machakos sits. We're looking at collaborative and integrated agricultural services. A number of players are there. Many of you have heard of the famous Katumani maize variety that was developed in the neighborhood of our university. So we work with Calvo and Calvi and other organizations that deal with agriculture. We are looking at also at livestock surveillance. We've been aware that particularly when there's a drier climate, some of the livestock ends up moving between even counties. Some of you may even have seen the conflict that drought and famine has brought in the northern parts of this country. And we needed to monitor this using also in association with the Space Science Cluster, because we have a nano satellite that is dedicated to this process. Then the second of these sub-themes is on cloud computing for health and well-being, linked to UN SDG number 3. So we seek to provide a one-stop online informatics, health informatics services, collaborate between different health practitioners and staff, offer data storage and access, offer cloud analytics on healthcare data, and finally integrating health information services so that one can, if they go for a checkup in one health center, their data is accessible to any of the health practitioners who needs to attend to them. Of course, within the premise of Data Protection Act, so that that data would have to be, someone would have to authorize their data to be shared. We would have to respect that from a purely ethical point of view. Then we're looking at cloud computing in education education and training. This is where most of us actually reside. And we are looking at appropriate educational technology, MOOCs, which some of our institutions are actually preparing, even as Kenya is planning to open an open university in Konza. The government, the current government has already highlighted that as a priority. So MOOCs offers online courses in an open manner, open source, and also in large scale so that many people can benefit. Particularly people who are in service, they are already working on the distant from the physical infrastructure of institutions. Open distance and e-learning. ODEL, many of our institutions are already thriving ODEL unit, which is actually in the future going to grow almost to the point where it will subsume some of our traditional schools. Then also looking at space science and surveillance. This is around innovation and infrastructure. We have developed a nano or cube satellite, and the applications would benefit us in that sense. So this speaks to aerospace systems. Now in this particular case, we are collaborating with Sapienza University of Rome and the University of Nairobi and other actors, looking at space debris observation, mitigation and remediation, remote sensing and wildlife surveillance and monitoring. Our School of Engineering and Technology is actually involved in a process in a project called Baridi Sana, which is developing cooling systems for the International Space Station, as well as one we call Simba, which is for monitoring of animals, and this is wildlife, which is a big source of revenue for this country. And then finally, we are looking at climate resilience and environmental sustainability because of the unpredictable weather events. We're just emerging out of a 5-year dry spell, so this is becoming more extreme and unpredictable as we go forward. We're looking at big data and monitoring and mapping water resources, and of course integrating different climate partners, because there's many actors. So the idea of this chair is not to replicate anything that is already being done, but integrating these different actors in a cloud computing platform where people are able to share data seamlessly. So now just to conclude, some of the challenges are based on the subtheme we are in today on integrating the social sciences in pandemic preparedness and response. I want to look at some of the challenges and how this can be mitigated. So one is we need to look at the issue of preparedness. We need to look at the issue of responsiveness and ultimately resilience. Now, if we look at preparedness as the first challenge, as universities, we need to realize that we're in a constant state of flux. We need to be able to anticipate that. The time when we had stable environments is now past. As we speak, there is a funding model for higher educational institutions that is being proposed, and this will have consequences in the way we run programs, the kind of students we attract, and also third stream income so that we are not too dependent on capitation from government sources. We need to look at sustaining organizational cultures that are empathic, robust, and open to change. Some of the biggest challenges are human-centered. You have very competent and qualified personnel, and the reason they stay in one institution or lead is really about whether they feel that the environment is empathic, whether you're open to change. A lot of creative people get very stressed out when they find that the bureaucracies they find themselves in does not allow them to actually promote creativity. If you recall from our very first few slides, we talked about creativity coming up actually in number 3 of the skills of the 21st century. And then anticipating context-appropriate disciplinary courses. So we need to start thinking like, what can we offer based on where we are? When you're in an environment where there's mining resources, maybe it's good to start some courses that are looking at mining specific to the resources there, not just generic. If you're in a dry area like ourselves in the arid and semi-arid, then the agriculture we teach should be actually speaking to the kind of varieties of crops that we thrive. Even the research we do should be around crops that are not very water thirsty, like those alien and exotic vegetations like the eucalyptus, blue gum tree. So we need to promote indigenous knowledge systems as well as local knowledge that we embrace. Then responsiveness is the second of the challenges. First is to anticipate emerging pedagogic and professional transdisciplinary trends. We've seen that transdisciplinarity is here to stay, and this is the way we need to go. We need to learn to collaborate. So as I speak about the cloud computing, the sustainable development, this is open collaboration, and I believe Meru University of Science and Technology does some of the things I've shared, and so we are open to collaborating in that spirit. Secondly, we need to re-equip existing programs. Some of the programs we have are not really geared towards solving real-world problems. They're not even CDC aligned yet. We need to look at how some of our courses like engineering, agriculture, even design can actually create income-generating activities to augment, resources that we discussed building because of the new funding models, as well as commercialize our intellectual capital and property. I think this is going to be a critical area as we move into the new funding model for universities. And then resilience, of course, is the third challenge. We need to future-proof our disciplinary courses. I think this is a time to revisit our programs and ask ourselves, are these going to be valid or relevant in the next 5 to 10 years? Or do we need to start doing some engineering, and imagineering in that sense, so that we can look at our higher educational institution programs as being context responsive and keeping in the times, as well as anticipating future trends. We need to leverage existing momentum by building durable, flexible, and sustainable disciplinary offerings. This is where core and elective courses become really important. And also we need to benchmark. So across our own institutions, there are institutions that are doing things very well. Like I learned that the Meru University of Science and Technology is really doing well with prototyping and building technologies that are very community focused. And so we'd be happy as Machakos to come and benchmark, and we invite you to also, if you find something useful from our side, you also feel free to do that. So looking forward now, since COVID-19, the new normal, as it's been coined in many places, means that disruption is now going to become something that we need to start anticipating. We need to realize that change is imperative. In fact, change is inevitable. So we need to start to think differently and become more resilient and quicker in responding to those changes. And to quote a Kenyan proverb, when the drum beats change, the dancers must adapt their steps. So we cannot sit back, complain, oh my goodness, things have changed, and that becomes the song. But to ask ourselves, since change is inevitable, what do we need to do? Since the drum beats have changed, as dancers, since we don't intend to beguile our dancing yet, how can we adapt our steps to stay in tune? Secondly, the new normal also brings with it new opportunities. We've talked about challenges indeed, but they're surmountable, not unsurmountable. So when you do SWOT analysis, or what we call sometimes PESTEL analysis, you'll find indeed there's challenges, but the challenges within them, if you flip them over, you'll find actually unique opportunities. And the early adopters, the ones who pick up on those trends early, will find themselves really leading the pack. So ours is to encourage each other to accept this new normal and to start looking for opportunities where we have previously seen that as threats or even challenges. An African proverb, which I like very much, says that tomorrow belongs to those who prepare today. So we cannot procrastinate. We must start working on those challenges right now so that we are ready and geared for that future, which is just knocking on our doorsteps. And then, most importantly, we need to embrace these 21st century teaching and learning skills. I showed you a list of them. And as we do that, we need to admit that the future is indeed digital. We cannot stop that from happening. We've been hearing about ChatGPT. This morning I was in a presentation with an Israeli School of Industrial Design, and they're using ChatGPT even for their presentations because a lot of them speak Hebrew, but they're not fluent in English, and they're able to do their presentations using this open software that is artificial intelligence, machine learning driven engines. And we need to accept that this is actually in the future. What are we going to do about it? So open and distance and e-learning is going to be critical. We are going to be looking at how e-portfolios, digital literacy, blended and hybrid learning in classrooms, where we take the classroom outside of the universities, and that's what we often do, but only in a limited way when we do industrial attachments. So we need to look at how we can actually do a lot more learning in the real world and complement that with what we do in these other spaces. We need to also look at the fourth industrial revolution, 5G, virtual conferences like now my presentation would not be possible prior to this platform being available, webinars, and cloud computing, which I've shared with you to a much greater detail as the case study of today. So with that state, I'd like to end my presentation for now, and really thank you for listening and invite some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mugendi, for that very insightful presentation. For me, the most important take-home that after listening to you, I have been able to identify are, for example, the multidisciplinary approaches that we should embrace now because they produce new disciplines that we didn't have before. I'm also appreciative of the multi-institutional approaches that, of course, if then we have to go forward now, then we have to embrace that. And of course, I've taken away the very important Kenyan proverb about when the drum beats change, then the dancers have to change their steps to be in sync with the drum beats. That's an interesting one. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite anybody in the audience who has a comment for Professor. Anybody with some comments can make them before we go now to our next presenter. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Most of them, when that happens, two things. One, people understood so much of this, and then secondly, there's the need to digest about these new concepts that we are learning today. But we're really grateful, Professor, for you to, oh, there's somebody somewhere. Dr. Amos, please. I'm hoping that from where you are, we can hear you.
I hope so. Thank you, Chair. I just want to appreciate Professor Mugendi for creating time to share with us his wealth of experience. And from the research docket, we're really grateful for your input. I know you are so busy, but you could create time to share your insights with us. My interest of late has been in material science, and I don't know what is your take on material science and with computer science and your area of design. I don't know what you have to say about that, especially in the growth of okay, sorry for that. I hope I'm clear now.
Yes, now I can hear you. You said something about computer science and material science.
Yes. And your area of design, especially with the advancement of AI and the many softwares that are coming up for that in that area. I don't know if there are any opportunities you know of funding and collaborations. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Shege. And I want to also appreciate you. You're the reason why I'm here. Having met you in other fora, particularly at the Concert Technopolis, when we were organizing a conference there last year. So your question is indeed part of what we do with design thinking and with the new trends now in collaborative work using the Internet of Things is the emergence of 3D or what 3D printing, sometimes known as additive manufacturing or additive printing, where we can actually create files and do three-dimensional renderings on computers. And like in the old days when before desktop publishing came up, we had to send our work to people with printing machines. Now everyone has a scanner, printer, photocopier, and now 3D printing is moving us in that direction. So you can actually almost print anything that you can actually design on a computer software. So with 3D printing, it brings computer science and design. For example, if I'm trying to designing, say, furniture, I'm able to print prototypes in 3D, and then send the same file if found it manufactured, say, in South Africa or China. I can send the file after tweaking the dimensions using the software. And so even the material science is moving in the same direction. Initially, we used plastics for three-dimensional 3D printing. Now they're actually using metals. In fact, they're even using it to even make cakes. So different types of materials now can be three-dimensionally printed. And that's an exciting area where material science, computer science, and the traditional humanities and design as a specific area comes in. I mentioned STEAM with the emphasis that we don't only look at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but we bring the arts because that's where aesthetics comes in. That's where we understand human preferences, semantics, which helps us, like why we have a red Ferrari and it's not green, why green represents eco-friendliness or blue is meant to be a color that is associated with clean air, while red and other colors are associated with speed and passion. So the humanities are critical in completing that picture, so that we not only come up with really structurally sound products, but also aesthetically pleasing. And this is where the humanities really can support our understanding of human psychology, also adding our understanding like fashion. How does fashion design come in? How do different fabrics contribute to not just furniture design, but even materials we use in automotive design and so on. So I believe this is a space for transdisciplinarity, where the material sciences, computer science, and the traditional humanities, including design, come together.
All right, thank you, Professor, for that. And maybe a comment I want to make. You talked about working together with Mary University in collaborative research, and I'd like to say that we are open to that. And probably we might want to look at areas of working in STEAM, for example, because it's a new topic that's coming up, and many calls for education seem to go towards wanting to embrace the arts into the STEM. And this is something maybe if we work together, then we can come up with a good project that can incorporate STEM. So thank you very much. And one last comment from Dr. Guyo, who is, of course, the rapporteur for today.
Thank you, Prof. My name is Dr. Guyo. I am interested in the application of cloud computing and pastoralism. And in this regard, Prof, maybe you are aware about attempts in this area by International Livestock Research Institute and UAP around 2012-13, where they are using index-based range management. Most of the ASAP, Northern Marsabit, Wajir, Garissa, Siolo, trying to use this technology to identify the spread of pasture and then advise the pastoralist herders how to migrate along those available pastures as a way of mitigating against drought and scarcity of pasture. But with all that, you realize, Prof, that we lost millions of livestock between 2019 and 2023 to the long drought in our country. My interest is maybe your input in terms of the efficacy of this knowledge and technology in terms of possibly knowledge, attitude, and the practice of the pastoralist herders to be able to consume this technology and salvage their livestock during the... we lost him. During drought, it's like we went off. I don't know whether you got me up to the end.
What I wanted to say, my network also is a bit unstable, so...
sorry? Bro, are we together?
Oh. Yes, I was accidentally muted by the host, so I just needed to say.
Yeah, sorry for that.
Not a problem. The issue of nomadic and pastoralist communities is one of the areas in which actually this cloud computing would really work because of the big data. And we are aware that there's many actors already in that space. So maybe what we would do is request that we could actually collaborate in that space, because that's one of the areas of interest for cloud computing. And because the UNESCO chair, I happen to be the chairholder, the UNESCO chair is a global platform of sharing. We can actually incorporate that as one of our projects. So maybe we can even start with an MOU between our two institutions, so that it's locked in as actually a part of supporting one of those sub-themes that we spoke about. Secondly, we are also aware that because of climate change and changes in the weather patterns, some of the communities, particularly pastures, are the most vulnerable. When pastures dry up, then they have to encroach on other communities, traditional territories. And this kind of big data can actually allow us to see what those patterns are. As you say correctly, we can create corridors that are neutral in the sense that they do not cause conflict, or even if they pass through another community, it can be negotiated in advance based on the big data, so we don't wait until there's a crisis, but we can see just almost like a weather forecast anticipates that there's going to be a change. So you tell people, let's stop, because the way things are going, we will need to work together. I think a lot of the surveillance so far has been used in monitoring wildlife. It uses cattle rustling, of course. These technologies have been used widely in places like Australia. So we're not inventing anything new, really. We're just trying to make those solutions work for us in Kenya and East Africa and Africa by extension. So, Daktari, we are very open to working with you. And if you don't get any of my details, talk to Dr. Shege, Amos Shege, and he's going to connect us. I'd be very happy for us to discuss. I'd also like to encourage you to look at a possible research project that could be presented next year in the International Association of Science Parks and Areas of Innovation. It will be hosted by Konza Technopolis, and we've already negotiated for a standalone sub-theme on cloud computing for sustainable development. So I'd encourage you to work with us, and Dr. Shege, because he's already part of that team, and myself, and we see how to go. And I think previously Dr. Musyoka Eunice talked about collaboration. One of the quickest ways to get research grants these days is to go for the transdisciplinary approach. If you bring together scientists, of the pure and applied sciences space, with people from the humanities and people from education and other spheres of interest, the chances of you getting funding for a transdisciplinary grant application are much higher than if you go for the traditional, disciplinary, primary disciplinary area. So this is also an encouragement to every up-and-coming researcher that if you want to attract international grants, this is a very quick and profitable way to invest your energies. So look for people who you have conversations with, even at lunch or tea, and just find a way to bring your own disciplinary, sensitivities to whatever they're doing, and you'll be surprised. Because like now, if you wanted to investigate climate change, of course you use big data, you use computer science, but when you want to do interviews with pastoralists or farmers, you need people in the humanities who can actually do the focus groups and the applied research and interviews and translations into local languages. So these are exciting spaces where if we work together, there is a chance of us succeeding. I'd like to mention that
is it our net or his?
we need to think of what we can do to sharpen our own skills. And then secondly, and finally, a single bracelet does not jingle. So if you want to make music in the research space, get disciplinary richness. And when I say a bracelet, I don't mean they all have to be the same type. The beauty of bracelets are coming from different materials, different colors. So this is what transdisciplinary kind of approaches give us as a richness. So with that, I'd like to wish you happy deliberations and also commend the organizers for a really
Professor, before you run off, just one more comment from one person, a quick one. Before you,
okay.
Yeah, that's one person, one quick one, yes.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I really do appreciate for your very enlightening kind of presentation that you've given us, Joseph. My concern is on SDG item number 4 on the cloud computing for space science and surveillance, sub-item on wildlife surveillance and monitoring, and also an item that you have just mentioned, although I am raised the concern to put it in line, which is on the cattle husbandry. Prof, you realize these are major concerns, especially within our borders, and my worry is then, why is the uptake of these technologies in such areas so low instead of it being a priority, which we believe strongly is a game changer to the scenarios that we are in. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for that question. I think it really touches on one of those points you made about complexity and the wickedness of some of the challenges we have. Because the minute you touch cattle rustling, you discover that it is a multi-layered issue. There is actually political actors involved, sometimes actually pulling strings in the background, where communities themselves have learned over time how to resolve their issues, but someone politicizes the matter. But I think overall, what I would say is many times the reason we don't have quick and widespread adoption of ideas like the one we're discussing is because people actually don't appreciate the richness of what these disciplines can contribute to their well-being. I think if you speak to the listening of many politicians and you help them see how they can benefit from the technologies, not in a financial sense, because unfortunately in Kenya we've corrupted our thinking that if things don't have a monetary value, we don't give them a high priority. But there are other benefits. If I'm a politician and I hear that by coming up with drought-resistant crops in food security in my county, if I manage big data for livestock patterns, I will reduce the number of conflicts within my own community, I would adopt it. But I think the way in which maybe we present some of this information needs to be distilled, which goes back to the point I made about the translation of some of our toolkits into languages that are accessible. And as you spoke about the number 4 of the sub-themes on cloud computing for space science and surveillance. This is extremely high-tech stuff, and this is where you see the greatest international collaboration happening. You may know that Kenya already has had a space station known as San Marino down in Malindi for many years, but many of us were not even aware. Even before independence, this was manned mainly by the Italians for many years. Kenya also has what is called the KSA, the Kenya Space Agency, which actually is doing some extremely good work, but we are not aware. So I think part of the role as researchers and academics, the role we can play is to demystify and unpack some of these very complex ideas so that it's accessible to people who need to know. Because once they get to understand, they become our champions. But before that, lay the burden of responsibility on us, that we are the ones who need to communicate it in a language that people understand. I think Nelson Mandela put it beautifully. He said, if you speak to someone in your language, let me put it in my first person. If Mugendi speaks to you in Mugendi's language, if Mugendi speaks to you in Mugendi's language, he's speaking to your mind. But if he speaks to you in your language, he's speaking to your heart. And I think a lot of times we keep the information at the intellectual and rational level, but we need to involve the emotional buy-in so that people can see how it's going to benefit them as individuals and as communities. And that should be our challenge when we adopt transdisciplinary thinking, that we enrich the discourse to the point where all the different disciplines and factors actually find there's something in it that connects to their own experience and also aspirations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. And we'll have an appreciative applause for Professor. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the contribution you've given to us.
Like I said, if you need to reach me, Dr. Amos Shege Kirongo has all my details, and I'd be happy to take this conversation forward, particularly around collaborating on cloud computing UNESCO chair.
Thank you so much, and we'll take it up and run with it. So thank you. At this juncture, we're going to invite somebody online. She's Musioka, Eunice. Eunice Musioka. Eunice, if you can hear me, and I think because of some technical hitch, we muted you, so we are going to unmute you. She's unmuted herself. Oh, I can see you unmuted yourself. Can you hear us, Eunice?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. So it's your turn. We're going to give you 10 minutes to tell us about mistranslation, figurative mistranslation in the Bible. The floor is yours, Eunice. Thank you. Eunice, you need to unmute yourself, and then you can make your presentation. Thank you. Hello, Eunice. Can you hear us?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Eunice. We can hear you now. Please proceed.
Yes, I'm Eunice Musioka, and I'm presenting a paper on mistranslation. I'm trying to cast it so that it appears instead of my face.
It's okay. That's okay.
I'm trying to share the paper with you people.
Hello, Eunice.
Hello, I'm trying to share the paper.
Okay, please do. Or if you're facing technical hitches, could we have another presenter, then we'll bring you after them? What do you think?
It is okay. Just have that other presenter, then I can share it out. But don't lock me out so that I can.
No, we won't. We wouldn't want to lock you out, Eunice. That would be very unfair for us. Okay, thank you. Orucha Justin is present, but I can see Eunice. Yes, you could come and present. Then we'll have Musyoka. Maybe Eunice will want to have your presentation on our laptop so that we don't have to exchange from one laptop to another. Okay.
It's not going to interfere with yours.
But then we need to see your presentation.
It's okay, you do it.
That's why I'm saying you can get some.
You didn't find it. You have it? Yes. John. It's here. Mine is this one.
Amos, IT support.
I think mine.
And Musyoka, please mute. Musyoka, please mute. And you must know that we are really excitedly waiting for the romance, Kikuyu romance.
Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I wish you well. My name is Wanja Kangandi. That is my school name. I want to present this paper that sounds like can elicit a lot of emotional attachment, but I am going to leverage it to the theme of the conference. Now, this is romance, and as we relate to romance, we would like to be asking ourselves why I would like to present it within the context of this
Kindly not, you just have 10 minutes.
Conference.
Please.
Yes?
Just have 10 minutes.
Oh yes, very quickly, I'll be very brief, sir. So in terms of relevance for the concept of romance, I would like to say that the pandemic in our literary world is a calamity, and therefore we consider this in literature as a metaphor for anything disastrous that causes distress or threat on human or welfare, well-being, or continuity. So the parameters within which I bring this paper is that romance is an important element in social affairs in terms of preparedness, that those people who have productive, concrete romantic unions are more prepared to face calamity and disaster. So that is the relationship between what we are preparing and the concept of romance. So my choice of genre is the Gikuyu popular song, and the study focuses on identifying how people in productive romantic unions are able to sort out the simple or complex disasters around them. And there you got our topic as summarizing this study. Now, I may not take you through so much into matters definition, because romance is a mysterious feeling of pleasure experienced by two adults, this particular time within the traditional African context of the adult male and female. And I raise this up because of matters arising today, where we have what in the literary world we are considering queer sexual practices. So we confine ourselves within the limitations of our African conventional mode, the union between male and female. I would like to take us further into indulgence with this study in terms of theory, and taking it to the theoretical approaches. Now, the approach I took here is narration, okay? Narration and its characteristics as proposed by Bades and Jeanette. So the three items here are: how is the story told? How is the story told in the selected songs? How is it told? What is told? And what is the outcome? That is basically what is reading the theoretical interpretations of the songs so selected. Take me to methods. Just go down. Now, the data is picked from 10 selected songs, a set of 10. Now, those 10 songs contain unions, productive unions, romantic unions, but within them, the point of our contention is the disasters surrounding those couples, those unions. So we'll confine ourselves to a sample of maybe 3 or 4 and see what is it people are battling with within the subject matters of the selected songs. We shall not go to the 10 because of the constraints of my 10 minutes. Now, when we go to the narratives themselves, The 10 songs include the first one, in we have a situation where the romance is facing colonial brutality. And when you mingle with the paper, you realize the constraints faced by the lovers. But because of the productive romantic union between the couple, then the disaster is not mammoth, the disaster is not destructive, but there is triumph. So the context of is wartime, romance during wartime, and wartime is almost deeper and heavier than an ordinary pandemic or even an epidemic. So the couple in this song is able to triumph the constraints of wartime. When you mingle with the paper, like I said, you will come across commodities of wartime that threaten humanity, but the couple survives. When you go to the second song, number 2, Wamahoa, the Wamahoa disaster is the constraints revolving around extramarital unions for both married and the unmarried, the extramarital context. But because of the productive romantic union among the couple, then there is again still triumph against that disaster. And then you can take me to Ningado. The disastrous context in Ningado is poverty. Now, poverty is a post-colonial characteristic of not only Kenya, but Africa and all the colonized people of the world. And so it is worse or almost similar. At the beginning I said that the pandemic in our world, the literary world, is actually a metaphor for any threat or disaster that threatens people. So in Nigado, the couple is able to fight or use romance as a buffer against poverty, and it is extreme poverty. By the end of that song, we are able to see that there's a lot of pleasure and there's a lot of tranquility and there's a lot of survival for this couple. Take me next. This song, Wayure, and Wayure is controversial because it is a song that brings us into the major parameters of European culture and the controversies it brings to the African culture. And here we have a problem of a man facing the outcomes of Christian parameters for marriage, that the monogamous nature of the Christian perception, or I don't even think I should be calling it perception, I should call it parameter as a yardstick for marital status, that the traditional African polygamous union is evil in the world of Christianity, in quotes, but then here the man is facing a double wedding sort of status where the wedding is taking place in church and wife number 2 appears to contest and she's handling the preacher and the man is in a trance, is in a confusion, but now he's supposed to be a Christian. The formal marriage is the one set up with the certificate in the church as provided for by the law and the Christian parameters. But so this man really is in a trance, he doesn't know what to do. And interestingly and very excitingly, because of our proposal that the European culture, the African culture should merge to come up with a hybrid, which we might call an African hybrid form, balancing the two, the European and the African. So this man acts like we are proposing that there should be that merger. So he says to the new wife, run on, hold on, don't fight the preacher, please hold on. And the veil and the gown is brought for you. And then I'm going to marry the 2 of you, and the 2 of you becomes mine, and you are my 2 debes. And the song is very interesting. I invite you to mingle with the paper, and you will come across that song. The calamity in My Dear Kwaheri is departure, distance. That the male in traditional African culture is free to get off the homestead and walk away, not only within Kenya but abroad. But the man here is going abroad, and there is that vacuum and gap. So what happens is that in my dear Kwaheri, the unity caused by romance again is able to assist the couple travail those irregularities of departure. And the departure is lengthy because the man goes abroad, he'll come after a long time. That is a problem in my dear Kwaheri, but romance is able to fill up the gaps. Send me to Abidjan. I will not talk about Abidjan because Abidjan is like my dear Kwaheri, and it is about departure and the question of migration to those places yonder, of course, for greener pastures. Send me more. The controversy in Hamisi, the song Hamisi, is cultural again and religious. Here, the problem is I belong to this culture and I belong to this religion. I am Christian and you are Muslim. There still must be a margin because, like the youthful ones amongst us might say that love shall not know any boundaries. So the couple of very different religious and cultural backgrounds are again able to forge a union and overcome the problems elicited by cultural and religious differences, and that too is important. Now, I maybe just mention one more song, and I hope I'm provoking you further to get into the analysis of the actual songs, because it's not possible to do it right here, right now. I personally paid for you. The payment is a hospital bill. The calamity in this song is an abandonment in hospital over an unwanted pregnancy. Now, these items are kind of COVID-19, but in social standards, these are disastrous outcomes. And human beings cannot really detach from eventualities that cause calamity and disaster. So, the young girl is in a status of unwanted pregnancy, in maternity, abandoned in maternity. And you see what happens, that this situation is leveled by the arrival of a lover, and the escape route is the romantic union between the two. So the hospital bill is paid, and there is departure from the hospital, and return back home, upkeep for the baby, and there is also payment, a return to school, and then the certificates come and employment follows. And in Nienge Korehera, you can see that the power of romance in averting disaster, handling it, and preparing people to battle with what surrounds them as eventualities of life is again brought out here. So, by way of conclusion, I would like to say that human beings experience predicament, calamity, disaster and misfortune in equal measure with tranquility and welfare. And so romance is an important agent of enhancing preparedness for calamity and disaster management. And in the selected 10 songs, the lovers are victims of diverse circumstances of emotional and psychological turmoil. Romance establishes a strong framework of intervention for each couple against threat and misfortune. And this shows that strong romantic unions are sources of successful social capacity against disaster and calamity. Chair, I would like to thank you very much and end that presentation there. And probably even before I go, and even to appreciate your applause, I would also like to maybe say that there are two romance patterns in Gikuyu. In chapter 2, we will look at another survey I've done on what I'm calling transi romance. So that what happens really when now the romance is broken and there are issues, and then what happens to the individual psychologically and emotionally, and how that alone is a threat to stability. So maybe thank you.
Thank you very much, Eunice. A very interesting topic, as we said. I'm sure people have questions to ask, but we are going to keep this. Thank you. You can take your seat.
Oh yes.
Yes, we'll keep. Just keep your questions, and we will ask Eunice some of them. But while you go to sit, Eunice, you might want to think about something like this. What about those who do not overcome? Just think about it. Just think about it. You will come and you'll talk to us about that. Thank you. Maybe we'll invite Musioka if she's still online.
Musioka, please.
Okay, Mr. Ram, could you please present? Thank you. And we suggest that if you're unable to share, just present, we will listen. Because it's taking up time for the other presenters. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Kindly unmute. Musioka, we cannot hear you. Kindly unmute. Please, Musioka, do not mute. Unmute yourself, and when you do, we can hear you, and we are not even sure whether you can hear us. Maybe if you can hear us, you type in the chat so that we know you can hear us. Musioka, maybe you even want to check your volumes. And you're moving to somewhere we don't know. Okay, Musioka, at this juncture we have to make a decision. We're not going to take you off, but we're going to have a presentation about the rationale behind naming of persons. And then we'll come to you. Hopefully you'll have sorted the movements and the settling down.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Yes, I won't take more. Okay, I just want to thank you for this opportunity that you've given me to present. Let me say that my name is Dr. Meriti Javas from Turkana University. I am presenting in conjunction with my namesake, Dr. Meriti Javas, he is there. And then there is also another colleague, Peter Lidumani, and we have done this paper, 3 of us. And as you can see, we are looking at the rationale behind naming of persons, the stepwise method among the Tigania subtribe of male community. This is something that is closely related to whatever I presented here last year about the Tigania lone ones, but it diverges a little. And I want to begin by asking you, have you ever wondered what is the meaning of your name? How come you were given that name? And when was that name given? What is the meaning of the name of your father, the name of your children, or the name that was given to your grandfather? If you try to establish the meaning of those ones, or the meaning of that, you will come to realize that there is a lot of information that we are losing every day. And that is the rationale that we have by coming up with this paper, so that we can shed light on what used to happen when it comes to the Meru or the Tiganians' way of naming. You realize that the naming of people will always differ from one community to the other. They are from one part of the country, from one part of the world to the other. And there is no specific way of naming. And that one tells us that there is a gap that needs to be filled, especially when it comes to us people from this community, where we know very well there was a clear way in which people were named and there were steps that were followed. But we are using that information, which is very, very not good for us. So this study tends to document the spectacular stepwise method of naming persons in the Tigania community and its importance. It aimed at exploring the rationale of naming with a view to recommending retention and preservation of positive sociocultural ideals for integrity and moral confidence of our society. I want to say how we started collecting the data for this. We adopted a descriptive research design and a qualitative approach to data analysis. And I can see that by looking at the community we went, looked at people who had information, and through snowballing, we went and identified some more because they could lead us to others that had information. We collected information up to saturation. And by doing so, of course, we were noting down the information that we were collecting, and we were using an audio recorder to ensure that we collect information that would help us analyze the data. Because you know very well, you cannot listen and write everything at a go. So we would just listen and then record, and then we could go and then transcribe whatever we had collected, and then analyze it in terms of these. And then, of course, the data, the meaning and all that would be presented using tables. Because of time now, I would like us to move to the results that we got from this study. And I would like to begin by saying that among the Tigania people, when a child was born, it started by relations. In Kimeru, we call that one Kemi. When it comes to a boy child, you are given 4. When it comes to a girl child, you are given 3. I don't know exactly why a boy was given 4, and then a girl 3. And the biblical cord was cut using a small knife that we call Kirunya in our community, but Omurunya in Maasai, because that is a borrowed one from Maasai. and the hair of that particular king was not shaved until the naming would take place. The mother would stay with the baby in the confinement in the house, or whatever is called a kombe, for a period of 3 months, during which the baby was not exposed to strangers. It was customary to give the child a very temporary name, awaiting the naming from a person to whom that particular child was named. Later, the child could be given the name in the process called kuiyura. The child then continued to grow with other village children. Then from there, we got the information that in the 17th century, you realize that Meru was, there were Nilotic people, like Masa. You remember the other time I said that this place was sometimes Maasai and Samburu were here, and that is why they left some of the ones that I was analyzing. And you realize that those are people that are militaristic in nature. And for us to conquer that, the boy child had to pass through stages in which he could be made to endure life, develop a character of perseverance, bravery, and so as to be molded into a state that could enable him or her protect the community or make sure that the family is protected. And by looking at that, of course, a child could be given a name depending on how he or she behaves. And you realize that as the child progresses from the stage of being named at the childhood, there is another stage that the boys used to pass through before initiation that was called Chibi. I know the Tonga might know that, but several others may not be aware, who come from other communities. And in the process, of course, people were handed and they were taken to the forest. They could be given some beating and of course, they were given some hand device, and through that they were given some name. And those are names that they could grow with until the time they could be initiated. And during that particular time, they were called Intane. And they were confined in a place for a period of 1 to 3 months, upon which they were given advice that concern the community, that concern the welfare of the people, and all that. And during that particular time, that particular person was supposed to be given a name, and that name was supposed to be given by the father. The father could be given an opportunity before the period of 1 to 3 months to present 3 names, upon which one of them was selected depending on the character of the person who was given. And it was very clear that that has to resonate with the traits and the kind of behavior that is allowed in the community. If the name was not acceptable, then they would send back to the sender and say, whatever you've given us is not resonating with whatever we know about you or whatever you know about this family. So they could be there, and then they're being given another opportunity to provide another name. And it is at that particular time that, of course, the boys were given a name that has to begin with a prefix M, and that was something they are taught. For instance, I'm called Ntoiteri, and my namesake there is Toibui. That is the only difference that we have as far as our names are concerned. So those are the kind of names that were given. And when it comes to the girls, of course, they will begin with the Sio or Sia, depending on the locality. That is why we will be here, Chianabea, Chabaitoro, I don't know, you can give quite a number, we have quite a number of them. Then you realize that when the European cultures may have recorded the names and given them meanings, this might possibly not have been the case in the African setting. The importance of giving names to humans cannot be overemphasized. Elders narrated on of course, narrated that on arrival at the Tigania place, they met a lot of resistance, and that is why they could, of course, mold people and give names that could help them make people behave in a manner that is acceptable. And then as the child, of course, grew, we have seen, they could pass through different ceremonies and rituals. I've seen from the beginning, of course, there is a ceremony, naming ceremony, and of course there were songs that were sung, like for the people that are down here, you remember the beginning, at the onset, that is at the childhood, where you will see those kind of songs were sung, and that was at that particular stage. Then there is Chibi stage, and then we would proceed to initiation, and that is how it followed. And when you're given the name after initiation, the name that you are given at childhood was dropped, and it was considered inappropriate or disrespectful to name people using their childhood names. Then the study also found out that there are a series of rituals I've mentioned that are new names and various sociocultural changes of status in a person among the Tigania people to be of paramount importance, and every time a good name was the aim. The aim was to give a good name. Then the social status among the Tigania was rigorous and difficult to achieve, but the community managed it through character manipulation, where people were manipulated or were meant to behave in a manner that is acceptable. We all remember that we came from Boa, and it was a nice experience. So we were to be made in a manner that we could behave and fit the society. Because here we've met Maasai, or they came, and of course they know they are Nilots and they have skills, so we have to be in a position to counter them. So in the process of combating invasion, naming among the Tigania people became a way of shaping character, encouraging handwork, good morals, values and responsibility in the community at all developmental stages of a person. So in conclusion, we are saying that naming of persons among the Tigania people was a way of shaping character, encouraging handwork, good morals, values and responsibility in the community at all developmental stages of a person. Naming as a cultural value was a preserving and documenting for posterity. We all come from different communities. Maybe Beatrice or Witty. Witty means something. Somebody was born at whatever time. And you know very well that in our cultural setup, people who are born maybe after maybe a series of other teams have passed on, they could be named these kind of names. People who are named, people who are born at this particular time, people who are born by people of this character, they were named this and that. But we realize that this culture is getting eroded, and now these people are being bombarded with the names that they don't even know what they mean. And we want people at least to get some light on what is the meaning. And it's very controversial nowadays, because you know very well that there are people who are advocating for even African names. Like you hear, like we have Ngui wa Thiong'o, Jomo Kenyatta, Uhuru Kenyatta, and they don't have names from maybe European and all that. So you ask yourself, why is it that we are giving names that we don't know what they mean? Do we have to continue that way? That is a story of another day. But in this paper, you will be getting the meanings of the names, like Getonga here, like Meriti and the like. So we'll be sharing with you the paper to know the meanings of people, the meanings of names that are given to people from the Ghana community, because we have done a lot of research in that. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause to the presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As we said, we keep our comments. We just have one more to go.
But thank you so much. We would really appreciate if you presenting.
You can proceed.
Eunice, proceed. Your 10 minutes begin now.
Okay, I'm trying to be allowed to share my documents, but I don't know whether I can just go through without sharing it.
Yes, it's okay. If we are unable to share this, we just present. We will listen keenly. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm presenting on figurative mistranslation in the Kikamba Bible. That is my topic, and I'm looking at misinterpretation as both a wrong transfer or a message that is not well transferred into the target text due to the use of figurative language that is used in the Bible. I'm looking at the Kikamba Bible, and I'm looking at Becca 1992. It says that there are 3 ways of trying to translate figurative language. One is the use of figures of speech that are similar in form and meaning from the source text and the target text. You can also make use of a figure of language that is similar in terms of meaning but differ in terms of form. You can also make use of paraphrasing. Instead of using an idiom form or a metaphor, you can make use of just direct language or a phrase that replaces that. Then I'm looking at mistranslation in the Bible can lead to the wrong faith or the wrong doctrine. And when the wrong doctrine is taught to people, they come up with a wrong kind of a faith or a faith that is opposite of what is expected. And this kind of faith will shape the way people think, it will shape their culture, it will reshape again the way they respond to the environment, and also the way they respond to pandemics like diseases, because of the kind of faith that they have. And I zeroed it down to the use of metaphors, the similes, and the idioms, and I was trying to investigate how metaphors and similes and idioms are being translated in the Kikamba Bible from, of course, English, because most of the translators were making use of the English Bible to translate it into Kikamba. Then in my analysis, I looked at the Bible because there's so many books, but I looked at a category that is a type of categorization that is done by the Standard Revision Bible, that is the Revised Standard Version, and I found that they have 7 categories of the books in the Bible, and I picked one category from each book. I picked one text from each category, one book from each category, and then again I picked 2 chapters from each book. And then I read through from the Revised Standard Edition, and then I was able to identify the metaphors, I was able to identify the idioms, and I was able to identify the similes that I used. And then in my analysis, I made use of the principles of the equivalence theory and also the relevant theory to guide me in analyzing, of course, what is this mistranslation, how meaning is lost using these two kind of theories or the principles in these 2 theories. An implicit kind of comparison that will make use of 2 different objects. And it happens that in during translation, then the translator must interpret the metaphor, then after that now relay it. So it happens if the translators or the translator misinterprets the metaphor, then it means that the audience of the target text will get the wrong kind of a meaning. And I looked at just a few of the metaphors, for example, in the book of Solomon, which was one of my texts. He says that my beloved is to me a bank of myrrh that is between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-Gedi. If the Bible readers can remember that. So here, there's a comparison of myrrh, which is a tree grown in the Hebrew community, which we don't have in the Kikamba culture. There's also the use of blossoms of henna. Henna is also a tree grown there. We don't have it in Kambani. So there's the use of vineyards. So during the translation, the interpreter misinterpreted the images that were used. For example, the bag of myrrh was translated as kamovuko, kamauta, meaning a small bag containing some good oil. Again, the vineyards were translated as a shamba, which of course, when you read the Bible, a vineyard was something of value. And then En-Gedi, because it is a proper noun, it was only Campanized in terms of pronunciation. But if you go back, we find that En-Gedi was actually a symbolic place, a place that was just in the wilderness, inside the wilderness, and there are waterfalls flowing from that. So there was misinterpretation in that. I also looked at other metaphors that included your eyes are dark. So if the translator again made use of a simile to translate this, and they only picked one quality of a dove, and in Kikamba it said, Medoma unita mauta makwe. Meaning, he only picked the idea of a dove being peaceful, but it could also have other meanings. Then there is the use of simile again. I also picked a few examples in the use of simile just to show you how mistranslation in the Kikamba Bible happens. So there is the use of, the daughter of Zion is left like a boat in a vineyard. The daughter of Zion is left like a boat in a vineyard, which was translated as Joya Zion. Of course, when you look at the daughter of Zion here, does not mean affluent, but in the Kikamba Bible, it was translated to mean affluent. Again, a boat in a vineyard. Remember, I've already said that vineyard was just a kind of a good shamba around that would be taken care of and put care of, and it is where trees will be planted or just ornamental trees. Then he also makes use of another metaphor, another simile, where he moves on to say, and the daughter of Zion is left like a lot in a cucumber field. The daughter of Zion is left like a lot in a cucumber field. Again, the daughter of Zion. The daughter here, of course, refers to the Israelite. The Zion, you remember, it is the city Jerusalem. And then cucumber field. Cucumbers were plants that among the Hebrew community had a great meaning. And that is why the children of Israel back in the wilderness, they cried when they remember the cucumbers they used to eat in Egypt. But in Kikamba, it is just translated to mean Mondoa Mungu, a shamba that contains a malenge or something like that. Then I also looked at a few idioms and idiomatic expressions. Of course, you know, they are culture-based, they are culture-specific, given to, tied up in a given language. For example, we say, he picked the bucket. If we translate it directly into Kikamba, it will lose its meaning. And here, I had a few of them, like for example, keep the marriage bed undefiled. The marriage bed undefiled. In Kikamba, it only says that a man and a woman are supposed to be faithful. So it is quite generalized. I also picked another one that says, our coach is green. Our coach is green. Then in Kikamba says, your kitanda kitu, meaning a green grass is our bed. When we say that my coat is green, it does not actually just refer to the bed. There is more to that. And then when you say green grass is our bed, in Kikamba, it actually loses the meaning. Then the other one is where God now begins to tell people that if they come before him with unfaithfulness, he will not listen to them. And it is put like this in the book of Isaiah. When you appear before me, I will hide my eyes from you. Why? Because your hands are full of blood. So we have appear before me, we have hide my eyes away from you, and then your hands are full of blood. Meaning, if you will appear before God in Kikamba, the meaning here means if you appear before God and your hands are full of blood, then I will not see me. So now it means that for you now, for God to see you in Kikamba, the way it has been translated, it will mean that for God to hear you, then your hands are supposed not to have blood. In Kikamba, we do not have any kind of an expression that ties to that. So it barely means literally your hands are not supposed to have blood so that you can hear from God. That means that then now a bad person or a preacher can come in and tell people for you now to appear before God, for you to go to listen to you, then your hands are not supposed to have blood. Of course, when your hands do not have blood, then it means you're already dead. And a number of many of them, but because of time, I will not be able to expound so many of them. So in my study, in my conclusion, I just say that figurative language in the Bible then needs to be translated accurately. I also recommend that translators should have some adequate knowledge of metaphorical use of language. They should go out of their way, out of the Bible, to understand metaphorical use of language and symbolic use of language before they do the translation. Then again, it is important for any object contained in the source text to be included in the target text. If it is impossible, for example, chariot, in Ukabani don't have chariot, then the translator can make use of footnotes just to give an elaboration on that. Then I recommend that the Bible that I use, because the Kikamba, we have 3 versions of the Kikamba Bible that I use, the one for 2012, which is said that it needs some review. If we have to get to a good reading, it needs some review. And then I say, further research can also be done on how this kind of mistranslation can lead to teaching of wrong doctrines in our easily get the wrong faith. And when people have the wrong faith, then they respond in the wrong way when it comes to the pandemics and diseases. And that is why you are seeing people having some doctrine and failing to go to church. I'm not saying the only reason is mistranslation, but it can lead to that. So I'm saying when we have proper Bible translation, then we can have the society prepared better and well to respond to pandemics and diseases that we face. That is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I wasn't able to share the script, but that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Musyoka. It was a very interesting one for those who understand the Bible. And we clap, sincerely, shake hands. It's very interesting, really. I think we have come to the end of our 4 presentations, and we now invite some limited discussion. Still remember the announcement that this is closing the workshop at main conference at 4:45. We have some few minutes to discuss, and I think we can start picking. We can start with the first one so that we go systematically. We are done with the professor. We engage him. We can go direct to romantic songs. Can go to romance. Kindly. Yeah. You are romantically satisfied.
Chair, I just respond to what you mentioned, that for those that do not triumph, I said that it's the research I did on that matter, which we can incorporate that tragic romance is disastrous. That is why the recommendation for this paper is that any social element that can boost romantic prosperity should be adopted. If that doesn't happen, then we have tragic romance, and it is a calamity on its own. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we go to the next presenter? Is the visionary, naming behind persons.
Chair, maybe I have something. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Dorothy, and I want to appreciate the presenters who've done the presentation in the afternoon. In fact, I came back from the IT field, but I was thrilled to come and see and watch what the presenters done for us. And one of the key things, I am appreciating what Eunice has done and her work on romance. And it's got me thinking, because we are from the IT field and those who are there, I don't know if we are able to model this. I'm looking at how we can be able to do a model on this field and be able to be predicting, because she says it is not predictable. And you know, in IT we are able to do models and be able to see how to predict. I want to ask the guys in IT, because I have them here, and especially in the artificial intelligence side, Dr. Amos, and your good student, Gitonga. We can collaborate and see if we are able to model this and precisely come up with a model of the same.
Wow, that is wonderful. You will have solved myriads of problems in divorce and come with stay breakup.
Well, give it a try. Recently, you follow media, you find guys who are so much in love, they're killing each other. So I'm wondering, do they kill each other because of romance, or is it because romance has disappeared?
Love and hate are two sides of the same coin.
Anyway, but it's a very interesting research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Eunice,
thank you, Chair, and thank you for the nice presentation. I was just wondering, I don't know if you went to the extent of the content of the song, because I think from the songs, over time, songs have changed. And I think the current generation are very interesting songs. A song can be sung, and at the end of the day, you just hear one thing. They just, I think they revolve around the music and the dynamics therein. I don't know if you went to the extent of the content of the song. Did you identify possibly some areas, some contexts that were not addressed? I don't know how you came up with the 10. I don't know if you looked at the diversity of the context, or what actually informed. You know, we are in different areas, and we are keen to know, how did you land in this 10? Are you saying that this 10 now encompass everything? Or did you identify some areas that are not usually addressed in terms of the songs that are there? And I would like you to respond also now to the nature of the songs that are coming. I think some of us are old school and we could link a theme with a song, but nowadays I think things are changing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Because of the constraints of time in the presentation and in a conference, this may not have come up well. What we do in literature, we do purposive sampling, where now from a disciplinary perspective, we pick out a selection of songs with similar characteristics. First, we identify the genre, and the genre was the popular Gikuyu song. Okay, now that's a genre. There are very many other genres, including the one you raised here. They're very, very recent, very popular with the youth today. But for this particular Sunday, the choice of Jonah is the Gikuyu popular song. And the corpus of the Gikuyu popular song is so huge that again, we've got to purposefully select those that have the characteristics that you want to study that particular time. And there are disciplinary implications in that selection. So the set was 10, and that doesn't mean that they are the only songs carrying those characteristics. So that really is the method. It's more elaborate in the paper. When you come to the subject matter, certainly when you go to the paper, you'll find now full analysis of the songs in isolation. And it is summative and very explanatory, very informative. I hope when that happens in the final submission, then you will be better informed.
Thank you. Okay, I think let's move in the interest of time to the other presentation is the naming. Rational naming. David. Yes. And any questions for them? Yes, Kitonga.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I also do really appreciate the presenters this afternoon. I want to attest to all of us, even the topics were interesting and we would have wished to interrogate them more if at all we had the opportunity of time. Now, regarding the naming of persons, to Dr. Javas's, we happen to share this platform and take note of some of the items. The erosion of the naming so far. And this one, for instance, the trends have led, you might see someone naming a child depending on the parent's career, such that if you are a driver, you will be called driver, which was not as usual before. My concern and peculiarity is what if you are in a career that didn't have a direct male one, like a mechanic, and now we are likely to meet so mechanical. You see, the translation of an English to criminalizing the enemy. Then the other thing, I'm aware of names were really organized, such that when a name was given and maybe a death took place for a young person, that name was shelved, was completely kind of isolated for some time within that kind of generation, that time. Or even when someone was involved in those queer and unacceptable actions within the community, then also the same, those ones were kind of avoided as much as possible. But today, it's becoming a different thing. Maybe by the time you can talk a little bit about that.
I realize most males are called after animals. Why? Like Kiroki, Joka, TC. And again, both of you have similar names. Are you related? Both names.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by addressing what Mr. Gitonga brought forth. It is true what he's saying. If there was a misfortune on a certain person who had a certain name, that name would be shelved for some time until maybe the community forgets. And there is another aspect which we did not bring up. because you know you cannot give everything in a presentation. This naming, this stepwise method of naming is somehow also losing track because of the intermarriages. Sometimes interracial marriages, intertribal marriages, where even the naming, like you want to name the firstborn son, according to the male, must go to the paternal grandparent. And if you are married now to another person, you know there is that clash of culture, and you may not particularly follow a certain system. On people adopting other things coming up, we used to adapt them. For example, during 1969, when the Apollo went to the moon, there is a whole Rupetan generation that was named Apollo. Similarly, if we can coin a name for an IT expert like Rongo, if we are to name a child after him, people will come. They will corrupt the IT expert based on what they want to call the child, and that will be the name of that child. So we are able to handle comings. Names are dynamic in terms of environment and the time.
Thank you. I think addition.
Okay, there is a name that there is a comment that he has said people tended to have animals name. When it comes to animals name, if you are born in such a time that there is somebody when died and there are so many misfortune of kids dying before you are born, you are given an animal name so that you are assumed to be an animal, so that the spirit will not come for you. The spirit will not identify you, and then you will end up being given an animal name.
Thank you. That is very clear. That's very clear. I think it comes African context. We can easily identify with ourselves what we are saying. The timekeepers are already seated up there. They literally want to carry us. One short question for Musyoka, Bible translation, kindly. I think she's still online, Musyoka.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, just be patient. We'll begin one question.
Musyoka, myself, my PhD was on interpretation, while yours is in translation, so it's about the same thing, whereas one is verbal, the other one is written. But I'd like to find out from you, to what extent do you think that translation can match in view of the fact that languages come from different cultural setups, and that being the case, then what can be done? Because if we look at Israel, where the Bible, which gives us the Bible, and we look at the cultural dynamics, and then we look at the African context, and we look at the cultural dynamics, to what extent can we then have similarity? Is it even possible?
Okay, thank you. We may not have the text being quite similar, but the message that is being translated from the source text to the target text can match to some extent. And that means now, because these are two different cultures and language is better in that culture, and remember, when people are reading the Bible, they want it to apply to their situation or to their circumstances currently. So I would advocate for a kind of a dynamic kind of translation approach. Dynamic approach is translation that is based too much on communicative function rather than the linguistic function. So that if, for example, we have a metaphor that is in the Hebrew culture and it does not match in any way in the culture of the Kikamba culture, now we should look at elements that are in Kikamba that can replace the images that are in the Igbo culture so that the people will have a similar impact as they read it. It may not be similar, I accept, but the impact or the effect to the target audience and the source text audience can be brought to a kind of a similarity where they respond to it in a similar way. And that can only be done if we have continuous kind of translating the Bible to match the current use of language, because language is dynamic and culture is also dynamic.
Thank you so much. We can end at that point. So that was a good presentation from Zoka and everybody who presented this afternoon. A big round of applause to them. And we thank you most sincerely. The VC has already arrived. He's seated somewhere waiting for us to join the team in Theatre 4. Kindly let's all proceed for closing session to Theatre 4. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.